Do you think this is a wise move by Lyft to start getting
definitely.
these bigger players in and start looking at the public market?
I make it in a much simpler fashion. I think they need more capital. Now, full disclosure, I am, through a fund I'm invested in, indirectly an investor in Lyft. My observation about the category is I think the category has deep economic issues, that for all intents and purposes, it got commoditized before it got anywhere near break even, and they don't own either the cars or have any control over the drivers. And what has been shown, at least in New York City, is that it's possible to segment and slice pieces of the market off and compete with Lyft and Uber by picking very narrow subsets of the marketplace.
Explain that.
So there's a company in New York that just goes up and down the avenues like a jitney, right? So it's very, very cheap if you're just going from 81st Street to Broadway or wherever, you can do that. And there's other ones. There's one that just takes 4- and 5-star Uber drivers and gives the driver a much better deal than what Uber does. And so there are a bunch of these people playing that game. And so I look at this and I go, the consumer value proposition to this point has felt really, really good. The driver proposition has not been good. And the unstated piece is, how do you replace the cars over time? Because at the current rate, I mean, the assumption is there's a limitless supply of new drivers, and I don't think that's actually true. And to my mind, Lyft has an opportunity now to have a much better relationship with the drivers. And I think they would be well advised to find a way that makes the whole experience more financially rewarding, and then to go to the consumers and say, you should pay more for this because our drivers will do better, this will be a better service long term. Because I think consumers have gotten too good a price to this point, which is why this thing has exploded and why the math has worked so poorly for the drivers.
What's so interesting, though, is we've seen the backlash that Delete Uber happened to be fueled, whether or not that was fair on Uber at the time.
Oh, indisputably fair.
Indisputably fair? Really? Why? Because...
Well, I just think that Uber has conducted itself uniformly with a complete disregard, not just for the law, but for social conventions.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at this and I go, you know, it's one story after another, and there are literally no data points on the other side. And, you know, all the stories could only be 70% accurate, and it would still be more than enough for people to go, you know what, you know, I'm not going to do that.
If you were a direct investor in Uber now, not even through a fund, as you mentioned,
I've had
with Lyft,
3 shots. I've had 3 shots, and I passed all 3 times on this issue, starting very, very early.
Because of the management, do you think?
Yes, because of the culture.
No.
That I thought there's, I personally, look, I have a value system, and I have a no a-hole rule. You know, I don't invest in certain kinds of people and against certain kinds of value systems. And I'm prepared to give up great returns to do that. It was obvious to me early that Uber had a brilliant idea and could be enormously successful. But at the same time, I was deeply troubled by what was already clear, even in those very early days, a culture that essentially not just flaunted rules for the sake of flaunting them, and didn't treat female employees well, and didn't treat drivers well. And I just thought, you know, there are better things for me to do with my capital. And, you know, Lyft has been better.
You can tip drivers, for example.
But it isn't perfect, and there's a lot of room for them to make it better. And I think that the sharing economy, as it's been broadly described, has had this promise in it that everyone would benefit from this. And I think that hasn't been true for the people driving the cars. And I'd like to see that. I think that's an attainable goal.